said she loves me. I'm lucky, guys like me don't get laid by girls like her.
Hi, I'm Christopher, and welcome to another episode of the Cabin Boy Knits Woolcast. This episode is going to be entirely focused on my trip to New York. I spent almost a week in New York, and I went there early to take in the city because it's one of my favorite cities, but also to go to Vogue Knitting Live. So what I'm going to talk about this episode is the knit nights that I attended, some of the yarn shops that I was able to go in and check out and actually buy some stuff, and also wanted to share with you one of my favorite classes. This is probably one of the best classes I've ever taken at Vogue Knitting Live. And then I'll also talk about the marketplace and the craziness of the marketplace. And I want to talk about some of the vendors in particular and show you some of the stuff that I picked up as well. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, and I will share my story with you. So I decided to go to New York early this year because I wanted to take in a number of things. I wanted to check out the galleries, but in particular I wanted to go to Knit Night at Alan Cumming's bar. And Alan Cumming is an actor, if you don't know. He's been in a number of movies. I think he's on The Good Wife and a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, at his bar, he has special nights. And on Tuesday night is Knit Night. So I definitely wanted to go to that. It was on my bucket list. So I went early, arrived in New York at around just after noon on Tuesday. Checked in, and I decided to book through Mr. B&B. Because it's like Airbnb. I wanted to save money because the more money I save on accommodation, the more money I could spend on yarn. So I stayed in Hell's Kitchen, which is just a couple blocks outside of Times Square, which is, it's a close proximity to the event, which works well. But it was also in Hell's Kitchen, which is a great area. It's got a ton of great restaurants and interesting shops, so it's a great place to stay. And it's also close proximity to the train, so you could get anywhere in New York fairly quickly. So I got there, checked in, had a great place, my own private entrance, and I would say that this place cost around $95 a night, so it was very, very reasonable, and the hosts were really, really nice. So had a great time, saved enough money to buy a lot of stuff. Anyway, so I get there, check in, and I decided what I wanted to do was walk as far as I possibly could to the event, and it was in the Lower East Side, and I was up on 49. So that's a long walk, but it gives you an opportunity to see the city and whatnot. But it was so cold when I got there that I decided to take the train part way. I get there, the event started I think at 6 o'clock, so I got there just after 6. Open the door, and my first impression is that it's smaller than I thought. So it's basically a long rectangle, and at the very end is the stage where the hosts sit. And the hosts are Josh Bennett and Brinny Maxwell. And I've taken Josh's class. I've taken some of his classes before, so I know him from his classes. I didn't know anything about Brinny Maxwell. Anyway, I get there, open the door, and it is packed with knitters wall to wall. And I'm looking around. I don't know anyone in the room, and there weren't any seats available except for one at the bar. So I decided to go to the bar. That was my only option at the time, and sat at the bar. And Colt, the bartender, was fantastic. Made me feel at home. Very welcoming guy. And when you mix knitters together with alcohol, it's going to be a party. And so I had a chat. I had great conversations with so many people in the room. Made a lot of friends. So it was terrific. I'd say there was probably around 3 guys in the room, in the bar, out of maybe 100. And then 2 other guys came later. They set up shop right behind me, which was hilarious because they set up a Swift and a ball winder, and they had bags and bags of works in progress. So it was great. They set up their own little studio in the bar, but it was a lot of fun. But one of the main impressions that I got when I was there was just my eyes were automatically drawn to Brinny. Brinny is a new knitter now. but it has a web series, which I was not familiar with at the time, so I went in to look at it afterwards. But the way she dresses, it's very late 50s, early 60s, which is one of my favorite time periods for fashion, and she just epitomized that. Even the way she carries herself and speaks. So it was a blast from the past, and it was wonderful and something that I hadn't experienced. So that was a great takeaway. But also all the friends that I met at the bar were awesome. After Knit Night was over, I was chatting with someone, and we kept talking and talking and talking. I ended up staying much later than I had anticipated, but it was great. I had a fantastic time. The next Knit Night was in the Upper West Side at Knitty City, and it started at 6 o'clock. I got there just after 6, and it was funny. I walk into this place, and right on the right side of the door, there's a group of women knitting, and I thought maybe I'm here on the wrong night. And then my eyes went to the back of the store, and I saw a bunch of guys sitting there. And it was actually Cairo from Cairo Designs who mentioned it to me or told me about the men's knitting night. So I get there, and he's there. It's the first time we'd met. We'd been exchanging messages on Instagram, and I saw some others that I knew there as well from Instagram. So it was great. We hung out. It was a very relaxed atmosphere. You could tell some guys were just coming right off of work, and we talked about everything under the sun. But it was just a very relaxed evening. It was fantastic, and the guys are super nice and let me into the circle of their circle of knitting, and it was great. Super nice guys, and again, it was a beautiful way to end the evening. And so went back to my place. But before I left, Cairo had mentioned that there was another knit night on this would have been Thursday night at String Things Studio in Brooklyn. And I thought, I don't have anything planned for a Thursday evening, so I'm going to go and attend that as well. So on Thursday night, I decided to go to Brooklyn and attend the men's knitting night at String Things Studio, and it was fantastic. It was, again, a wonderful experience. I show up at the yarn shop and open the door and look directly in the back of the store, and Lewis is sitting there facing the door. Lewis, Brooklyn Boy Knits, and Cairo had his back to me walking when I went in, sat beside Cairo, and there were a number of other guys sitting there as well. And the conversation that I had that night was totally different than the night before. There was a lot of shop talk, and what I mean by that is there was a lot of talking about knitting and the knitting industry, and you could see the wheels turning, and the environment, it felt very creative. There was it was a wonderful exchange amongst all the guys there, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was amazing. So had a great time. There was also Mr. Hugs showed up, another Canadian, so their Canadians were well represented. And then we also had a giveaway, and I was looking for a picture of it. And the giveaway was yarn, and it was from Knitting Wolf Luxury Yarns, and that is one of my favorite independent yarns, and it's also Canadian. So Knitting Wolf Luxury Yarns has a very distinctive voice, and that's what I love about it. I find it, if I were to walk into a yarn store and it was sitting on a shelf, I'd definitely know who dyed that yarn. So it was a favorite with the guys as well. Very nice yarn, so I highly recommend you check that out. And I'll definitely put a link to that site. But overall, we had an amazing evening. I was having so much fun, and Vogue Knitting Live hadn't even started yet. So that was a great time. I actually left with a couple of the guys and went back uptown, I guess, from Brooklyn. I guess that's the direction. And then had an early night because I had an early class the following day on Friday at Vogue Knitting Live. So before I get into Vogue Knitting Live, I also wanted to talk about some of the yarn shops I went to. So I've had an opportunity to pop into a couple of them. Not all of them, because I was splitting my time. I was trying to split my time between going to art galleries and seeing the knitting shops. I'm interested in knitting shops, just how they, what the people are like in the shops, and how they present their wool, what types of wool they carry. I knew I was going to be doing a lot of buying at the marketplace, so it wasn't particularly there to shop, but I did end up doing a lot of shopping as well. But so I split my time between the galleries and the knit shops. Took in a Warhol exhibit, which was fantastic at Whitney, and then went to some smaller galleries. And it was talk about getting inspired. There's so many great galleries in New York, so I had a fantastic time. But let's talk about yarn and the yarn shops. Here's the first one. Okay, so I want to talk about Purl Soho. I've never been to Purl Soho before. Didn't know what to expect. I kind of thought, because it's in Soho, they'll probably have decent yarn. It'll probably be nice. I imagine that the markup's going to be significant because it was in Soho. I was not prepared though for what I experienced in the store. You walk into the store, and on the left-hand side is all of their brand, and it is phenomenal. It's so great. I think I spent probably 45 minutes to an hour in there. I was standing there looking at their flax down yarn, and there were 4 of us crowded around the flax down yarn. And so we started talking about it and how lovely it felt, and for me personally, it's nice to see linen coming back into yarn and incorporating it. This is a perfect way to incorporate linen, because linen can be tough. It takes a while to work it into to make it soft. So when you mix it with merino and baby alpaca, you get a beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. So I'm talking to these 3 women about it, and it turns out 2 of the women are from the east coast of Canada, and the other one is from Vancouver. So I thought that was quite amusing. Out of all the people that I was talking to in the store, end up being Canadians. Anyway, this yarn is absolutely fantastic, and kudos to you for bringing linen back. I know that linen is definitely gaining in popularity again, and there are mills set up. I think Canada has 1 mill right now that will process flax into linen. So anyway, that was a nice surprise. It's so soft. It's wonderful. The next one is that I wanted to share with you is cashmere merino bloom. So guess what this is made out of? You're right, cashmere in merino, and it's so nice and soft. It's lovely. And you might be wondering why. I think in a couple of other episodes ago, I had mentioned that there's more to the world than merino. Absolutely true. And I think I managed to hit around 5 or 6 different breeds during my trip, so I was quite pleased with it. But when I see merino in a beautiful mix, or if I see the way it's been dyed in a particular way, I'll definitely gravitate towards it. So really, really nice. Very, very happy with that. And then picked up 2 other skeins of multi-purpose wool, and what I'm going to do with these 2 is I'm going to put them in the same dye pot, and I'll show you how the yarn picks up the dye going through, and they're both undyed. So but I always find it interesting dyeing the gray yarns with the white yarns, and looking at the end product to see what it looks like. So I will share that with you on a future episode. So Purl Soho, very impressed. The staff are very knowledgeable, and it's a terrific store. The lighting, very, very important in a yarn store, and the lighting is great. I was able to see all of the colors, and the selection's fantastic. The main draw for me would be to go back for their own yarn. It's absolutely spectacular. So loved it. Highly recommend it. So on the next one was the Brooklyn General Store, and I've heard about Brooklyn General Store. I've never been able to make it there, and So what I love about this store is it feels like a general store, but also they have a lot of locally sourced yarn, and I love that because it's great to promote your local wool industry, and I think that's important. And it helps form the character of the yarn store. So what I remember about Brooklyn General Store is, the first thing would be, the fact that they do promote their local yarns, and I think that's terrific. Also, when I walked into the store, up front and center was natural dyed products, which I think is pretty gutsy for a yarn store because not everyone gets natural dyes. I mean, it's difficult when you're holding up a natural dye with fantastic acid-based dyes that are shiny and glittery. It's hard to sell this guy. So, kudos to you, Brooklyn General Store, for doing that. Ritual Dyes is also at Vogue Knitting Live. So I bought one skein in their store, and I was looking at others when I was at Vogue Knitting Live. But I was happy to see that. So kudos to you. They also had their own line, and it was the Brooklyn Barn Wool, and this was or is alpaca and cormo and silk, and it's a beautiful blend. And I also love the color too. I thought that was nice. I don't usually buy green yarn, but that was quite nice. And then Le Bien-Ami is, has been talked about. Everyone talks about it. I think it's an American in Paris story. The dyeing is beautiful. I love this is beautifully dyed product. So I was happy to get my hands on that too. I have I guess a second chapter to Brooklyn General Store, which I'll pick up in a minute because I do want to talk about some of the yarn that I purchased. The other yarn shop I wanted to talk about is String Things Studio in Brooklyn. That's where I went on Thursday night to the men's knit night. And, I didn't have a lot of time to look through the store. However, I did do a flyby or walk through and look at the yarn twice. And I usually like to do it 4 or 5 times. But I did get my hands on some Road to China, which is silk, alpaca, and cashmere, and it's absolutely beautiful. And camel as well. It's absolutely gorgeous, and the colors are stunning. So I was so happy to get my hands on that. One thing I wanted to mention with respect to String Things Studio is, not only do they have a beautifully curated yarn store, but and anyone can do that. Anyone, I mean, I shouldn't say anyone can do it, but that there is a talent in having a well curated yarn store. But what makes this store special is the sense of community. It's not only a well curated yarn store, but it's a wonderful, it's such an inviting place. And it was my first time in the store, and I felt so welcome, and you can just feel the sense of community in this place. So for those of you in Brooklyn, you have a great thing going, because this store is fantastic. It was definitely one of my favorite stores. Highly recommend it. Felicia, you're doing a phenomenal job. So keep it up, Felicia Eve. So Felicia Eve, you're doing a phenomenal job. So I love the store. And it's so difficult to build that. Not everyone can build that sense of community in their yarn shop. So kudos to you. So that was the yarn shops. Now I wanted to talk about the class that I took at Vogue Knitting Live. I actually took 2 classes and a lecture, but I want to focus on one of them, and that is Franklin Habit's class. So Franklin, I know you mentioned that you listened to this, so please don't turn it off. I'm going to give feedback on the two elements of the class. One was the presentation, and second, the content. And so the class was called A Sense of Proportion, and I was interested in the topic because, and I was also interested in the fact that Franklin was teaching it. And I've never taken a Franklin Habit class before, but I have met Franklin. I met Franklin a couple of years ago at the men's knitting retreat. So always interested to take his class. And Franklin is incredibly articulate and well-educated. He looks like a professor, and I could see how some people might be intimidated by him. And I think one of the wonderful things about his class is before the class even starts, Franklin starts talking to the class and shares stories that are somewhat humbling. And I think that's brilliant, because what it does is it removes any level that you have between yourself and the instructor, and the fact that those are stories that really truly are humbling. Bring him basically open up the lines of communication between the teacher and the student, and it really helps us identify ourselves with the instructor. And I thought that was brilliant. And the line of communication, the flow of communication between the instructor and the student was extremely strong. He would check in with the class and make sure everybody was on the same page, and he did it in a way that wasn't condescending. It was he was truly there to make sure that we understood what we were talking about, or what he was talking about. A phenomenal job of teaching. Like that's he should basically run a class on how to teach a class. I thought he was phenomenal. Probably one of the strongest instructors I've seen. And the content was wonderful as well. It was a class, a sense of proportion. We were talking about shawls and hats and socks and mittens. And basically, he'd give us a formula for calculating, the size that would fit you. And we would talk about the relationship between the commonalities between these garments. Talked about the golden rule and simple mathematics, and it was fantastic. It was great. It was one of those, the penny finally dropped. I wish I had taken that class 15 years ago. If I'd taken that class 15 years ago, I wouldn't have had to work through and try to figure some of these things out. But it didn't, understanding the relationship between all of these, understanding the 45-degree angles in which we decrease, and really it was fantastic. It was a wonderful class. Highly recommend it. Franklin teaches at a lot of festivals all over the place, all over the world. If you are fortunate enough to be at the same festival, I highly recommend that you take one of his classes. And also, Franklin, this is one of your new classes, and I would strongly encourage you to keep doing it. It's a fantastic class. Really, I was so impressed. So thank you so much for that class. Now let's get into the marketplace. The marketplace for me is exciting because I get to meet the vendors, which I love doing. Get to talk to the vendors. I love assessing or looking at the way that they've set up their yarn. And this time I honestly wasn't as excited after I went through the vendor list, because I got a different impression than what I actually saw there. I was looking for certain things. I was looking for breed-specific sheep and natural dyers, and then also acid-based dyes that are inspiring or creative or set themselves apart from the others. And I got that, they hit a home run in all of these categories. So I was pleasantly surprised, and it was probably one of the best marketplaces. But just to set the tone, it's kind of like the Las Vegas of yarn shows. It's packed with people, tons of vendors, and the knit celebrities are everywhere. So all the who's who of knitting are there. And so that's fun as well, to see them. I think I grabbed Nathan to get the sockmatician to get a photo and to chat with him a little bit about knitting. So that was fun. Eric P. Lutz was there. There were tons of people. I can go on and on for half an hour on all the people that were there. One person that I did not see, Nancy Marchand, who was there. I wanted to see her, because when you talk about who would you like to have at your dinner table to have a chat, and when you put it in a knitting context, Nancy's always at my table. So hoping to see her at the next festival. But there was a lot of people there. And again, I could go on and on. London Kay, I had a great conversation with her. You know, London is a crocheter that truly inspires me. Her energy is fantastic. I love her work. I love the fact that she's doing her work on the street. She actually has a book coming out in September, so I'll be looking for that as well. And I think Lady Di, don't want to forget to mention Lady Di. When I see her every day, I think there's a couple of things. I love her dyeing, but also she has the best smile in the world, and she gives the best hugs. So, you know, it was just, you know, 2 days of all of that. It's actually overwhelming as well. So it was fantastic. But let's get to the yarn, and I will talk about. I'm trying to figure out how to best explain this or talk about it, but I'm going to go probably in the order in which I bought the yarn. But my first one, huge surprise for me anyway, was Yarn Vibes. I had no idea what Yarn Vibes was or is, and they're actually from Ireland, and I absolutely love this story. So Yarn Vibes, they use locally sourced wool, and locally sourced for Yarn Vibes is Northern Ireland. So they use sheep from Northern Ireland, and they use the mills from Northern Ireland, and they get their dyers from there as well. And the dyeing is fantastic. I love this story. So they're forming an economy, a wool economy, and using locally sourced product for it. It's very similar to the Upper Canada Fibre Shed, something we're trying to do here in Canada. So I definitely felt a kinship when I was talking to them. And I was their first purchaser as well. So I was very, very happy about that. So you know, it was wonderful, wonderful experience. And what a way to kick off the marketplace. So that was my first purchase. Bought the yarn and then bought a little kit as well. And the colors are beautiful. So very, very happy with this. The next one I wanted to talk about is, and if you want to count the breeds with me, that's fine too. But because I hit a number of various breeds of sheep, more than I had anticipated, and not just sheep either. I had multiple different fiber sources. The next one is Flying Goat Fibers, Flying Goat Farms. And this is BFL and Cormo. I love BFL, and Cormo's great as well, but they work well together. And so, you know, I was attracted to a couple things. One, the fact that it was BFL and Cormo, and secondly, from the dye job. You know, I like when you put blue and brown together. Not many people do that. It's a beautiful blue color. I bought a complimentary brown to go with it, although I mustn't have had my glasses on, or I was probably talking too much and not paying attention. I did look at the needle size, and it says US 8 to 11, but then I look at the weight, and one's sport weight and one's heavy DK. It's kind of close, I guess. Anyway, very happy with that. So BFL and Cormo. The next one on my list is Nutmeg Fibers and Nutmeg or Natural Dyers. And this I find very interesting. Well, first of all, the label is very similar to my label, so that was fun. And they have different types of labels for different weights of yarn. Super nice people. I had a great chat with them. What I found interesting about this, and you will see this skein in a future episode, but the color, I would have guessed maybe it's chestnut. It's actually cochineal and iron. And so when you take cochineal and iron, you usually get a color. It depends on, obviously, on a number of variables, but one of them is the heat temperature and also the amount of iron that you put in this. And so I'm trying to figure out, you know, what I want to do is show you when I put cochineal and iron together and show you the difference in colors. But I thought this was pretty interesting. It's a beautiful color. It's a beautiful brown. And then the next one is indigo. And I'm going to bring this one back too, because there's a couple things that I want talk to you about with respect to dyeing indigo. So this is merino, very soft, and it is worsted weight. So check them out. Very, very good natural dyers. The next one I wanted to talk about, it seems like every time I go somewhere, I accumulate crushes, yarn crushes. And so definitely I was looking forward to seeing Wing and a Prayer Farm and Tammy, because Tammy is a fantastic dyer, and I highly respect her craft and the colors that she uses. And so Tammy dyed with Shetland wool. She used Shetland wool, and Shetland isn't something that I've dyed before because Shetland comes in so many wonderful colors naturally. I've never really thought about dyeing it, so I am definitely going to think about dyeing it now. But she did a great job, and this is it's a beautiful yellow, and this is a green. These are the colors of a hockey team that I grew up with and played on. Wexford Warriors. So I was attracted to the color, but the green is especially nice, and I think it's there's definitely indigo in here, and woad. Very, very nice, and great job. So very, very impressed, and I'm always excited to see her at the shows. So that was a great purchase. That was also at Brooklyn General Store. They were hosting her. The next one is, this is, when I talk about vendors and the way that they're set up, Long Island Livestock is definitely one of the best spaces. It's one of my favorite spaces. There's enough room to walk around. I think they probably occupy 2 to 3 actual sites together. But the way that they have their yarn displayed is wonderful because it's not tied up in skeins. So it hangs down, you can see the drape of it, and you get to feel it. And I think that's really important, especially for their product. It's a lot of it's alpaca, and I think they have silk, alpaca, and merino. Absolutely beautiful. It feels wonderful. So I was chatting with Tabitha about the yarn, and it was super nice that she took the time to amuse me and talk to me about her yarn. But it's absolutely beautiful, and I love the way that they have the yarn displayed. It's very complimentary to the yarn. I also picked up another skein as well, and this is silk, and this one is silk and cashmere cloud, mohair, and alpaca. So the stringing together, I think there's silk in here. That's the cashmere and alpaca. So that was quite nice. And very interesting. So that was a nice find. So I highly recommend to check out their website as well. It's a very, very great product. Moving to the last basket. And again, keep in mind, I did save money on my hotel. Didn't go to extravagant restaurants, so it was all in an effort to save money so I could buy additional yarn. I'm always worried though when I get to the border, and they might think that I'm buying it to sell the yarn. So, and that has happened to me in the past. So the next one I wanted to talk about was an acid-based dye, and this is Bison and Silk, and it's from the Fiberists. And the Fiberists, I will remember their vendor site as well, because they have set it up in a way that looks like you're in a laboratory, and they have lab jackets on, and it's two really nice guys, two bearish guys who do a fantastic job of dyeing. Look at the colors, and I saw that from a distance, and it immediately attracted to me. I didn't see anything like this at all in any of the vendors. So I love the fiber that they're using. I think it's great, and I love their dyeing as well. Very distinct, and a very distinct voice, and the way that they set up and put their yarn on display is fantastic. They did a great job. So kudos to you guys for all the work that you did. I'm very, very happy and excited and looking forward to knitting this. So the next vendor I went to see was Bayhaven Short Tails, and they have Finn sheep. And so I picked up some Finn yarn. I think they were exhausted. They weren't really into having a conversation. And I was the only one in the booth, but I get it. You know, you've seen hundreds of people, if not thousands. So, but anyway, it was I like getting my hands on Finn sheep, so I was happy to get that. The next one was I went into Lady Di's booth to buy some yarn from her, and I saw some cool hats, so I thought that I would pick up the hat. And it basically says on it Knitwit, so I thought that was fun. So I picked up the yarn and looked at the label when I got home, and it says Alex Creates, which I thought was hilarious because I was there to pick up Lady Di yarn in her booth, and I picked up Alex Creates. I'd met Alex probably about 30 minutes before I bought the yarn. So anyway, Alex, I will tell you how the hat knits up, but the colors are great, so thank you for that. The next one is Handspun Hope, and Handspun Hope works with women in Rwanda and provides opportunities for them so that they can create wool. And this is merino, and it is actually dyed in eucalyptus. So it's a beautiful color. And the next one is cotton. I don't usually buy cotton, but this one was dyed in Cosmos, and so I wanted to pick that up. Also, it's a great story, and I wanted to support them. Thanks for having this available and giving me the ability to pick it up. I'm really happy, and I like your story. So after I went to that, I was doing my last roundup before I was ready to leave, and I went by the Starlight Knitting Society, which was a booth that I walked past a few times, and it was just too busy, and I didn't get in. I didn't feel like elbowing anyone. And I walked by again, and Tim, a guy named Tim who works there, grabbed me and he started chatting about Instagram and whatnot, and we took a picture. And then I went in for the kill and went into the store and looked around. Bought a t-shirt, which I love. But I was looking around at their yarn, what they had for sale, and I happened upon this. It's Anne of Green Gables collection, and it's 6 and 7 fiber. I actually sent a note to 6 and 7 fiber asking them about this and the inspiration for it. But in Canada, every kid has either read or knows about Anne of Green Gables. And I actually used to live one town away from Lucy Maud Montgomery, who wrote Anne of Green Gables. And it's funny enough, the colors actually remind me of Anne of Green Gables. And so I thought it was great. Thought it was meant to be taken home. So I'm going to take this kit home. It's kind of like a cowl, so I will knit that up and take a picture and show you, but I'm very happy with the colors. It's great. So it was meant to be. So thanks, Tim, for chatting with me and pulling me in the vendor and pulling me into your booth, and I'm glad you did because I'm very happy with this purchase. The last group of yarn that I wanted to talk about was definitely one of the highlights for me. It is Flying Fibers, and Flying Fibers does very important work, I believe. They are representing some heritage breeds, some breeds that we don't normally see, and they're bringing them to the public, and I think that that's key. There's so many wonderful things that you can do with this yarn, and I would encourage people that are at some of these shows, if you see Flying Fibers or farms like this that are promoting different breeds, definitely have a conversation with them. Ask them why they're interested in the breeds. There's so many wonderful things about this yarn. when I look at the Leicester Longwool, I was really happy to see this. Leicester Longwool is a sheep that came over to Canada in the mid 1800s, and from the United States and from the UK. And a lot of when it came from the United States, it was a lot of people who weren't interested in sticking around the U.S. After the Civil War and were loyal to the Crown. And so they're called United Empire Loyalists, and they came to Canada, and with them they brought Leicester Longwools, or a lot of Leicester Longwools. So Leicester Longwools used to be one of the primary sheep in Canada. So it was nice to see that. Flying Fibers is from Pennsylvania, so it was nice to see Pennsylvania represented, and some of the United Empire Loyalists came from Pennsylvania as well. So we're all related sheep-wise, so it was nice to see that. And I had a couple of other ones that I picked up from them, Teeswater, and this is BFL, Blue Faced Leicester, and Wensleydale. So they had a lot of great, and some more Wensleydale in here as well. I would say I definitely spent the bulk of my budget on this yarn. I couldn't get enough of it, and I loved having a conversation with them. They are fantastic, and they're important to the whole yarn industry. So again, I encourage people out there to, when you see farms like this, or when you see Flying Fibers, have a conversation with them. Talk to them about their wool. Ask them why they're interested in these breeds, and you'll definitely learn something. And I honestly believe, there's the yarn out there, especially the heritage breeds out there, that are so conducive to a lot of patterns. But a lot of us just gravitate to merino. But there's so much in the world, or that the sheep have to offer beyond merino wool, and this is some of it. So this is what excites me. This is what truly made me happy. So many things made me happy in New York, but this, I was very, very happy to see Lincoln Longwools and some of the heritage breeds represented at Vogue Knitting Live. So very, very happy with this. Anyway, just wanted to share my haul with you, share my story with you. Just want to do a shout out to some of my fiber heroes for this episode. It's definitely Felicia Eve and Purl from Knitty City and from String Things Studio, who create space for knitters. Also to Club Cumming as well, who creates space for knitters. And I think it's so important for us to get together, have conversations. It's when you create space, you bring people together that have commonality or common interest in knitting and crocheting. And it helps facilitate conversation. As I mentioned in some of my knit nights, I had completely different conversations with different groups of people, all wonderful, and it's so positive, and I think those definitely is needed in a lot of lives. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all of the people like Felicia Eve and Purl, who open their studios up to knitters, open up their bars to knitters, and allow us to get together and knit. So that's what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to share with you. And I wish everyone a great week, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.